4x4, supercharged, and in solar yellow. Now that's my kind of toy. That's this week on Motoring 2001.
TSN's Motoring 2001 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.
It's been said that other than working trucks, pickup trucks have become the sports cars of the day. Well, if there's any truck that fits into that segment, it's this baby. This is the Nissan Frontier Crew Cab. It's supercharged, and how about the color? We'll talk more about this vehicle later on, but first we're going to revisit with a gentleman we met several years ago. His name is Fred Lewis. Now, Fred loves pickup trucks, but for Fred, they're not sports cars. As a matter of fact, they're more like a work of art. It's a lot of work.
It takes a long time.
This story began in the 50s when Fred Lewis began a feed and supply business in Pickering, Ontario. He sold Honda motorcycles, washing machines, hardware, livestock feed, and Ford equipment and tractors. Then in 1975, the Trudeau government decided Pickering was a good place for an airport and began expropriating land that included Fred's business.
Well, as the auctioneer told, I asked him the night before what I was to do, and he said, "Oh, you'll laugh a little and you'll cry a little, and it'll come automatically," and so it did. There was 3 full-time auction rings. They started about 8:30 in the morning and run till about 9:30 at night. There was over 500 bidders. It was the biggest sale in history in that area.
The airport was never built, and it took 10 years and over $80,000 in legal fees before Fred received any money for his property. Fred, who was nearing his 75th birthday, is not one to sit still, so he began restoring used Ford tractors. And 15 years ago, the tractors were joined by Ford pickup trucks.
Well, they're all from the West. We attempted one Ontario truck several years ago, and it was a lost cause. They're so rusted. There's nothing wrong with Ontario. It's just the salt we use that causes the problem. They were so rusted that we patch, and when we're through, we have nothing to be proud of because we know the patches that are under the paint. So we'll get them all from the West where they didn't use salt. They're using a little bit now, but these trucks were retired before they started using salt. So it's just unbelievable. There's just no rust. I aim for 48 to 52. I just love those models. I have 2 or 3 or 4 53s, and I think I have a 56 out there yet. I have 8 or 9 out there yet that I've paid for and haven't got home. I always have some out there. And they're honest people out there. I can go back in 1 or 2 or 3 years and still get them. It's no problem. Well, it's a V8, Ford famous V8 flathead, very simple motor, 239 cubic inch. I think they were rated at 100 horsepower. I'm not sure how it's measured, but that's what the books say. The engines are mostly seized because they've set for quite a while, so we have to strip them right down, including taking the engine out, and we send it away and have it factory rebuilt. The tractors, those are good usable tractors that did come off probably 100-acre farms, but now there's very few 100-acre farms. Most of the farms have gone big, 2 and 3 and 5,000. So those tractors are not, I never sell to a farmer anymore. They are retired off the farm, but they're sold to doctors, lawyers, dentists, and undertakers, and playboys who come out of the big cities and buy a bit of country Canada, and they want a tractor. I'm not trying to do a commercial for Ford, but I think they're the most popular used or new truck in the world. They really have proven to be a real solid truck. And the very first truck I owned was a 1948 pickup. So I have a lot of respect and a lot of admiration for this model of truck.
Whine, moan, complain. I say, pump it up! That's coming up later on Kenzie's Corner.
But the best part, without question, is this Mark Levinson stereo. This thing cranks out the best sound I think I've ever listened to in a car or even at home.
Your knees.
We got a bloody commercial. You know, we at Motoring were the first to bring you shots of the SC430 when we caught them taking photographs of it at the docks. This week on Test Drive, we take a look at the real thing. Now, the beauty of the SC430, unlike some of its competition, is that it's a hard top in winter, which gives you the integrity to deal with the cold, but when the weather turns to this, and it's magnificent, well, you just sit there and the whole lot is done completely automatically. My sole input, about 20 seconds with the primary digit. Now we're ready for test drive. Power for the SC430 comes from a delightful 4.3 litre twin-cam V8. By altering the valve timing, tweaking the intake and using the displacement, Lexus give this natty number 300 horsepower and 325 pounds-feet of torque. Press on and the smoothness displayed at idle stays until redline. Mat the pedal from a standstill at 100 kilometers an hour comes in under 6 seconds. Now that's impressive. However, more so is the 80 to 120 time. At under 5 seconds, this car is like greased lightning, and this comes in spite of the car's 4,000 pound mass. This willing work ethic comes in part because of the 5-speed automatic. It holds the gears to redline, and when a kickdown is needed, well, it comes quickly. You know, with the roof up, the structural integrity of this SC430, well, it's as tight as a drum. When you drop the roof down, you do introduce a little bit of cowl shake, but it's nothing to write home about. In short, the execution of this vehicle, it's wonderful. The tight body gives the SC430 suspension a good base of operations. The fully independent double wishbone design limits body roll, and only when you turn the skid control system off do you find any understeer. In the pylons, the massive 245/40 ZR18 run-flat tyres provided seemingly endless amounts of grip and the steering an accurate sense of what's happening at the front tyres. The remarkable part is that this level of handling is achieved without sacrificing the satiny soft ride quality. Technically, there is a back seat in this SC430. However, unless you're very small, enjoy sitting near vertically and having no legroom, you should view this area as additional interior storage space. Around at the back, the trunk is quite roomy with the roof up. Fold it down, well, and it shrinks to about the right size for a couple of overnight bags, which when you think about the back seat space is probably appropriate. However, you must be very careful when you're loading this area, as the roof panel sits in a very exposed position. Stopping power comes from a huge set of vented front and solid rear discs that are controlled by a superior anti-lock system. Dropping the anchor brings short straight stops that measure just 104 feet from 80k. The anti-lock system also includes both brake force distribution and brake assist. From these luxurious leather seats to this lovely bird's eye maple, this Lexus is the epitome of loaded. Indeed, there's not a single option to be had. How far does the luxury go? Well, you get power everything cruise control, and the power items, well, they run up to and include this power tilt and telescopic steering wheel. When you take the key out, it powers back to ease entry and exit. You also get a very effective set of climate controls, and they work equally well whether the top is up or down, but I've saved the best for last. This Mark Levinson radio is quite simply outstanding and probably the best I've ever listened to, especially when you crank it. On the the safety front, the SC430 fares very well, bringing both front and side seat-mounted airbags and three-point belts in all positions. In the event of a rollover, the occupants are protected by reinforced windshield pillars and a pair of rollover hoops that are housed within the rear headrests.
You know, Lexus are going to shake up the high-end convertible market with this new SC430. There's very few cars in the world, SLK accepted, that offer the best of both worlds. Put a set of snow tyres on and power up the hardtop and you'll ride out any winter. On a magnificent day like today, well, it's got the wherewithal to run with the best in the world, and that's going to set it apart. Talking about a part, it's now time for me to depart and enjoy the rest of the day.
The Nissan Frontier was first launched in 1998 with a 4-cylinder power plant. A V6 was added in '99, and then the crew cab the following year with 4 doors and rear seating for 3. Our test vehicle came with the 3.3-liter single-cam engine rated at 170 horsepower and 200 pounds-feet of torque at 2,800 RPM. Now add on the supercharger and you boost the horsepower to 210 and the torque to 231. To appreciate the whole package, choose the 5-speed standard gearbox for a fun drive. Now the short box may pose a problem for the Mr. Fix-It in the family, but Nissan will soon have a 2002 long box version in a showroom near you.
Midas tip of the week concerns fuel octane requirements. Most of today's cars and light trucks, the majority of them are designed to run on 87 octane or low octane unleaded fuel. Now there's a few notable exceptions. If you have a high performance car or an engine that has turbocharging or supercharging, in many cases they require 91 octane premium unleaded fuel. And in most cases those cars have labeling right on the gas gauge to bring your attention to that fact. When you pull up to the pumps, though, in many cars, you may be confused because there's 3, sometimes 4 levels of octane available at the pumps. Now, what you want to do is consult your owner's manual to find out the minimum requirement for your engine. My vehicle, for example, in my owner's manual says 87 octane is all that I require, the low octane fuel. And even with 330,000 kilometers on this vehicle, the engine runs quite well. It's quite happy to run on 87 octane fuel. But that isn't always the case. On high mileage vehicles, quite often you'll find that you've had to move up to 89 or 91 octane fuel on that vehicle that was designed to run on 87. You had to move up the scale to get rid of spark knock or pinging under load or acceleration. In many cases, that's trying to tell you that you need to get the vehicle in and have some attention paid to things like decarbonizing and engine tuning. If your spark timing is out of spec or your EGR valve is non-functional, your engine will be much more critical of low octane fuel. It'll want higher octane fuel to run well. So if you get that vehicle in, get it decarbonized and tuned up, you may be able to bring it back down to the 87 octane it was designed to run on and save yourself a lot of money on fuel. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Auto journalists were in for a real treat recently at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. Not only was former SAAP rally great Eric Carlson in town, but he also brought along some very talented drivers. The SAAP performance team is comprised of men who work in the technical division of SAAP in Sweden. This was their first opportunity in North America to demonstrate that when driver and machine become one, the results can be phenomenal.
This team started up at 87 for a 50 years anniversary, and we're using this 900 turbo 3-door sedan, and that's actually quite standard. We have done nothing but increase the tire pressure. That's all we do.
Speaking of tires, keep your eye on the left front. This exercise demonstrated the Saab's ability to react in an emergency situation with little or no driver input. Then it was time for the Snake, led by team leader Bank Dahl.
If you start up with the Snake, that we call it, I think it's showing how smooth you can go and narrow to the other car, you know, and still have full control.
You're the leader, all the pressure's on you?
Yeah, all the pressure is on me, you can say that, yeah. But that's, I don't know if it's easier to be in the front or in the back, you know, they have to increase the speed a little bit more and when you do this turning and so on. But in front we have to keep the speed down, to keep them steady back there.
There are people called stunt drivers, but do you consider yourself stunt drivers or?
No, we are not stunt drivers, we are common guys who have done a lot of driving. I think we are quite experienced driver, all of us, because we have done a lot of rally driving back home in Sweden and other countries in Europe. I think we have been rally driving for 10, 15 years, all of us. So.
The team effort, a chemistry, how important is that among the team?
I think it's quite important, otherwise it won't work. Everyone has to be on top of everything, you know. And we all love to drive cars, and that's the main thing, I think.
They have combined experience and...
It's called the XL7. XL for extra large, 7 for its capacity. It's got a peppy V6, 170 horsepower. It looks great on the outside, just as nice on the inside. And oh, by the way, did I tell you that this vehicle is a Suzuki? And you're saying, Suzuki, and you're turning the page. Well, hang on. It wasn't that long ago when Suzuki launched the Grand Vitara. And when automotive journalists, including yours truly, got in the vehicle, we all said, this is a Suzuki. I mean, the quality had improved that much. So much so, we selected the Grand Vitara as our sport utility of the year. Now, have the improvements continued with the XL7? We'll find out over the next few months as this vehicle enters our long-term fleet. All right, let's head to the garage and join Bill Gardner.
Brad, you know how they say looks can be deceiving? Well, when it comes to your vehicle's tires, that's really, really true. And I saved a tire here that we replaced about a month ago on one of our customers' cars because it's a perfect example of how easily looks can deceive you. At a glance, this tire really doesn't look all that bad. We look around the sidewall, it looks to be pretty much intact. When we look at the tread, there's an adequate amount of tread depth, no signs of uneven wear from misalignment or cupping. But when we turn the tire around and look at the other sidewall, we see some telltale signs. First of all, a crease extending all the way around the side of the tire, and that crease got there as a result of the tire folding like that from underinflation. There was a sharp fold in the sidewall. Now when we look at the inside of the tire, the carcass of the tire, we can see it's completely disintegrated. It's absolutely ruined inside, and there's fistfuls of crumb rubber inside the tire. Now the only thing that causes that to occur is from running at zero inflation pressure. There was such a tremendous amount of flexing taking place in the sidewalls of this tire, it built up tremendous heat in the carcass, and it starts to disintegrate from the inside out. Now in many cases, if the load and the speed and the ambient temperature were high enough, this tire would have completely disintegrated. But in this case, it happened on a cold day, and it was on the rear wheel of a fairly lightweight vehicle, a Honda Accord, and it's a pretty good sized tire. So even with very low inflation pressure, it still carried the car okay, and the motorist really couldn't detect that there was anything wrong until it was way too late. So when we say looks are deceiving, inflation pressure is something you don't want to rely on your eye to pick up. A lot of people walk by their car, take a quick glance at the tires. They don't look grossly underinflated, so they continue to drive. That's where a tire pressure gauge comes in. You can't rely on the look of the tire because looks can be deceiving. So make sure that you make regular tire pressure checks with your gauge. Now, tire pressure fluctuates normally with ambient temperature, so you're going to have to adjust tire pressure monthly as the seasons change. That's normal. And a lot of modern cars with aluminum alloy rims tend to leak around the rim flange in cold weather, and some of them all year round when they get corrosion on them. So these are things that you want to keep in check by making your monthly tire pressure check and adding air as necessary. A tire like this that was so grossly underinflated at highway speeds on a hot day could have been a recipe for disaster. So that's the reason you want to make regular checks. One thing I always suggest to my customers, buy a good quality tire pressure gauge, keep it on the sun visor or somewhere in the car where you'll see it once in a while, and that's a visual cue to remind you to check the tire pressure. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2001.
Well, it looks like Canada has a new national sport. Instead of hockey, it's complaining about gasoline prices. The CAA appears to be on the verge of organizing a protest march to Ottawa. The politicians are complaining about the gasoline companies. I say, give me a break. You got company presidents making $3 million a year, laying off 4,000 working people to raise the value of their stock options, and you're complaining about gasoline? Now, I know I told you this story a couple of years ago, but it's worth retelling. I saw a woman paying for her gas in a self-serve, and she bought a half a liter of Evian water. Now, at the time, gasoline was about 65 cents a liter. She paid $1.50 for half a liter of water. Some guy in France turned on his tap for 3 seconds. They ship it across the ocean, like we don't have any water in Canada, and she's complaining about the price of gasoline? No wonder Evian spelled backwards is naive. Well, Canada actually has cheap gasoline by international standards. It only looks expensive because we're right next to the United States, and of course, they're living in a dream world down there. Now, if they just took the price that they pay for their military and applied it to the cost of gasoline, it would be a different story. I mean, you think the Americans would have spent $87 quadrillion bombing Iraq back into the Stone Age if Kuwait grew Brussels sprouts? I don't think so. And even as it is, the price of gas is starting to creep up in the States. And I saw a news report the other day. They were interviewing people who were filling up their Exxon Valdez sport utility vehicles, and they were whining about the fact it cost them $100 a week to ferry their kids to soccer practice. Now, wait a minute. If the price of gas goes up and they get rid of their sport use and get into passenger cars, I say raise those prices. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Before we go, a few final thoughts on the Nissan Frontier Crew Cab. As I mentioned earlier, with that short box, and especially that yellow color, it's not your average working man's truck. But having said that, I took it for a spin on the backstretch at Woodbine Racetrack in Toronto, and we're talking truck people here, and it was a unanimous thumbs up. So it looks like Nissan have got themselves a winner. The question is, can this company, which could use some profit, make any money on this pickup truck? Well, I'm happy to report that's one problem I don't have to worry about. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 2001 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.